Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I can't do this justice, but I tried to cut this clip from the Stu Peters Network with Dr. Artis down to about 1/3. But I highly, highly suggest that you go look up Stu Peters Network on YouTube, on Rumble, and go get the real deal. And it's called Watch the Water. Let's go. All right, here's a thought. Think about transhumanism for a second. A lot of people think this is merging humans with computer chips in your brains and things like that. Now, what if transhumanism is actually putting reptile DNA into an actual human being? Because remember, everyone, it's not what you believe. It's what these evil people believe. It's their calendar, it's their creed, it's their religion. That's what they go by. So transhumanism might very well be about turning us into sons of Cain, or simply put, sons of Satan. Think about that for a sec. Here you go.
This guy has been on many stages with me. He still practices right now medicine and is an ER doc, and he sent me a text. It actually was dated December 1st, and I did not see it until like December 18th. I don't know how I didn't see it, but the text read, "Hey, Dr. Artis, if you got bit by a rattlesnake, would you go to a hospital and get anti-venom?" And I realized when I saw him that he must have saw an interview I did on InfoWars. So Kate Daly did an interview with me and wanted to go over my thoughts of monoclonal antibodies. Well, I had been given some research studies that actually bothered me. I didn't like the idea based on the data in these research studies. I didn't think monoclonal antibodies were safe long-term, not short-term, but long-term. Now I read the actual text message, got in the shower, and while I was in the shower, I was sitting there thinking, why would he send me that text? It has nothing to do with COVID, like zero, nothing to do with COVID. So I'm going through this and I'm thinking about the text, and all my brain keeps going to is, why is he mentioning, wouldn't I go get anti-venom? Is there something about anti-venom I don't know? So I actually got out of the shower, went and got on the internet, and I wanted to know what is anti-venom? Only to find out that most antivenoms are monoclonal antibodies or polyclonal antibodies. And then I got it. Then I knew why he sent it to me. He wanted me to immediately see a question that he knew I would say, of course I would. If I got bit by a rattlesnake, of course I'm going to go to the hospital and get antivenom. So in his mind, I think he knew this was a way, or God inspired him to send me this message, that Dr. Artis would be able to relate yes to the answer, then go figure out why it is he would say yes. Okay, this is where it all started. I will repeat what Steve Kirsch said to an audience with me last month. He said, if the CDC says something to do, you do the opposite. If the NIH says to do something, go the opposite. FDA, do the opposite. I'm sitting there realizing that antivenom is monoclonal antibodies, and then I immediately revert back to, in my own head, I'm not trusting anything the CDC, NIH, or FDA says. Is our federal health agencies, are they recommending monoclonal antibodies for COVID-19? Now, this is in the middle of December. No, they're not.
Right.
They've been bad-mouthing monoclonal antibodies this whole time.
They stripped them out of Florida when DeSantis wanted to use them.
And then January 21st of this year, they totally stripped out monoclonal antibodies. They do not want you touching monoclonal antibodies. They also didn't want you from the beginning to touch hydroxychloroquine.
Yeah.
They also don't want you touching ivermectin. They also don't want you touching NAC,
Yes.
and acetylcysteine. So that the things they tell you to avoid, we know they're telling you to avoid because they work. I cannot believe the amount of evil behind this pandemic with what I've realized since then. I realized all of a sudden that monoclonal antibodies are anti-venom. The federal government doesn't want us using anti-venom. Why are they bashing anti-venom, and why are we finding anti-venom works against COVID? Is it not a virus? Is it a venom? Like, this is what I want to know. Like, is COVID a venom? And this is why they don't want you using monoclonal antibodies. The easiest way to figure that out is, has that ever been fact-checked? And I wanted to know, was there ever any mention that the source could have been a snake?
And?
Oh my God, I couldn't believe it. Over and over and over in the media in January and February of 2020 are nonstop publications that the original source could either be from bats, snakes, or pangolins. And every time the snake is mentioned, fact checkers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, constantly fact check it and spin it to the bats. There's no fact checking about bats. They keep letting you look at bats. In the beginning, in January of 2020, the scientists inside of China said this can't be from these bats. These bats hibernate and it's the winter. When they did genetic sequences from the antibodies in the people who were sick in Wuhan, they found that their genetic sequence was not most like bats. They were most like two snakes. Proteins from the Chinese crate and the king cobra. Then I find in April of 2020, there's a research study published in France where they're finding that the receptors in the brain called nicotinic acetylcholinesterase receptors, that these are actually bound most tightly to snake venom of crate and cobra is what they're finding, and that the spike protein from SARS-CoV-2 is most identical to Chinese crate and king cobra venom. Then I find out that there's an actual doctor who works at the University of Pittsburgh in May.
This is insane right here.
In May of 2020.
Yep.
Works in a computational lab dealing with genetic sequencing.
Now remember,
And he's been researching for 5 months.
Is the power
Sequencing
number,
of spike proteins,
and they're
trying to solve the
using
mystery of
that
SARS-CoV-2
to try to
victims.
break your
And he says he's got a big
with
thing
God.
big press release. They're going to actually announce all their findings. And Bing Liu is his name.
Setback in the quest to understand coronavirus after a researcher is shot and killed. 37-year-old Bing Liu was on the verge of making significant findings on COVID-19.
When I say that they have lied to you about everything in relationship to COVID, they've even lied about the viral part of COVID. Now you have to understand here, my entire stance for the last year and a half has been to educate, warn people about hospital protocols because of a drug called Remdesivir.
Right.
So, in this realization that this could all be related to venom, something bothered me in the January 21st EUA that came out from the FDA about Remdesivir. In this 42-page document, it actually says there's only one drug that cannot be co-administered with Remdesivir at the same time because it negates the antiviral properties of Remdesivir, and that drug is hydroxychloroquine. In 2020, January, there's this incredible study that's published where there's been over like a 10-year period where a company has been funding a research study gene mapping all the genes of the venoms and proteins and peptides inside of king cobra venom. And in January 2020, they published their findings. Oh, ask me if I was shocked when I saw that it was 19 toxic venom proteins that they isolated that specifically target organs in your body. Guess what's been known since 2005 blocks the nicotine receptors in the brainstem being injured by cobra venom and viper venom. Guess what drug does that?
Chloroquine.
Hydroxychloroquine and chloroquine. Remdesivir, packaged and stored as it is delivered to hospitals, comes in a little glass vial. It's called lyophilized powder. It actually has a white to yellowish tint. Guess what color snake venom has when it's stored? Then to be diluted in sodium chloride or distilled water to be administered in an IV. Or if people are buying king cobra venom lyophilized, they mix it in the same preparation as listed on the fact sheet for remdesivir to actually take cobra venom or any other viper venom and inject it into horses to make monoclonal antibodies.
In simple terms, this enzyme related to rattlesnake venom that's been found in humans is likely causing tremendous damage, leading to COVID-19 deaths.
And then they take you through all of the elevated enzymes in the blood samples of these people that are naturally found in rattlesnake venom and viper venom that are in levels they've never seen before. Do you want to know how they got there? 5 to 10 days of remdesivir. They've known since 2005 if you inject a mouse with cobra venom, you inject it like they're doing with remdesivir, injecting it into your veins, it actually causes a cytokine storm in the lungs of all animals. I am convinced that COVID-19 is not a respiratory virus of any kind. It is actually venom poisoning, and they're using, I believe, synthesized peptides and proteins from venoms of snakes, and they're administering them and targeting them to certain people. Now, the amazing thing about these 19 toxins found in cobra venom, they're specifically sequenced to target specific organs, like the pancreas in a diabetic, like the heart in a heart disease patient, like the liver in a hepatitis patient.
Okay, I looked it up. During a cytokine storm, various inflammatory cytokines are produced at a much higher rate than normal. This overproduction of cytokines causes positive feedback on other immune cells to occur, which allows for more immune cells to be recruited to the site of the injury that can lead to organ damage.
This is the most original of all bioweapons ever. Snake venom. I mean, we know how poisonous snakes are. This is the most obvious bioweapon ever. When I say this is the most evil thing I've ever encountered in my entire life, could you ever have imagined that the one greatest symbol of evil in all of Christendom, what is the symbol of evil in Christianity?
The serpent.
The serpent. Can you think of anything more evil than envenomating the entire world with snake venom and then injecting snake venom into your veins and then using mRNA technology that they've been isolating from snake venom for years? And then I realized something. I realized how they've been spreading this.
Mild and kind. Kent is kind tasting to your taste buds, kind tasting to your throat. So there's nothing to disturb your full enjoyment of the goodness of Kent's finest quality tobaccos. So get your taste buds back to normal.
There are nicotine receptors in your brainstem that control your diaphragm. Your diaphragm has to contract to be able to allow oxygen at all to get into your lungs. They are using crate venom and cobra venom, calling it COVID-19. You're drinking it, it's getting it into your brainstem, and it's paralyzing your diaphragm's ability to breathe. I cannot say this enough. In the very beginning of COVID, it was being reported around the world that the least demographic represented in hospitals being hospitalized for COVID-19 were smokers. Around the world, it was less than 5% of everybody in hospitals were actually smokers. And they found that odd only because this was a respiratory virus.
Doesn't make any sense.
Wouldn't it be that the people who are shoving tobacco and nicotine in their lungs would be more apt to be traumatized by a novel respiratory virus? But that's not what they saw. What was amazing is when this started getting reported in the first 6 months of COVID in 2020 around the world, guess what our federal government did? Anthony Fauci, the NIH, CDC, and the FDA all came out and started pumping in the media that there's no better time than right now to quit smoking. And they actually lied to you, and they lied to the entire world and said smokers are being hospitalized at rates higher than any other demographic. Well, the truth is, these nicotine receptors that are affected by cobra venom and crate venom that control your ability to breathe and was causing your oxygen levels to fall, that on a pulse oximeter looks like you have pneumonia. No, you weren't. You were being paralyzed. Actually, you couldn't breathe. And your heart rhythm was actually being dropped by the same receptors. Do you know that smokers, nicotine ties to those, and then cobra venom and crate venom can't bind to those receptors, so it can't paralyze your diaphragm? So they knew and were theorizing in France in April of 2020 when they figured out that it was the nicotine receptors that control the diaphragm's ability to breathe, was what the spike protein was targeting because it most looked like the neurotoxin, neuro being brain, neurotoxin of crate and cobra venom. They started theorizing that studies need to be done that we start giving people nicotine to protect them from getting COVID. It absolutely is known that nicotine is protective against COVID-19 because it stops these venoms from damaging and connecting to these nicotine receptors in your brain that control your diaphragm's ability to breathe. But once you go into a hospital because you can't breathe, if you're not a smoker and you don't do the nicotine, they put you on Remdesivir. Remdesivir is venom from a cobra. It's attaching itself to the nicotine receptors in your brain. You then can't breathe, and then at the same time, it destroys the inside of your lungs through what's called a cytokine storm. That is what cobra venom does.
Ladies and gentlemen, this man says it straight. Like I've been shouting for a couple years now, several years, to anyone who would listen anyway. Are you ready to stand up in judgment against these animals, these pieces of filth? Or are you just willing to be lab rats?
Yeah.
And then they say they got to put you on a ventilator. Why are they putting you on ventilators? They're putting you on ventilators because they're going to put you on sedation drugs to put you on the vent. And they can actually murder you by euthanizing you with drugs that act similarly to the venom. They have to sedate you because when they go to shove a tube down your trachea to get into your lungs,
You'll pull it out.
you'll pull it out or you'll fight them as they're trying to shove it in there. So they have to sedate you. So they use morphine, fentanyl, Presidex, lorazepam, or midazolam. Those 5 drugs act on the same centers of your brain that control the diaphragm's breathing and your heart's ability to breathe. These drugs are euthanizing drugs, and they actually will put you on these protocols at the same time they have you on Remdesivir. The entire attempt is to slow down your breathing and your diaphragm, and you will die. They've got the cocktail down pat. The average person dies on day 9 of COVID-19 hospitalized treatment. They only authorize, per the NIH, 2 5-day treatments of Remdesivir. It's amazing that the 9th day is the day that most people die.
Welcome to the lab, you bunch of rats. Let that sink in.
I've said this for about a year now that I actually believe this is more of a religious war on the entire world. I've been adamant about that, actually. The message of Christ forever was, he's the master healer. And faith precedes all miracles, not vaccines.
He made a blind man see.
Right.
He touched the leper.
So why are we actually putting more faith in drugs, and why is a man of the cloth supposedly putting more faith in science and a drug than he is in telling people to pray to God? God's greatest creation was you, and you are made up of a DNA strand of genetics that are unique to you. If I was going to do something incredibly evil, how ironic would it be that the Catholic Church or whoever would use the one symbol of an animal that represents evil in all religion, which is either the snake or the dragon, which is actually just a snake with legs. You take that snake or that serpent, and you figure out how to isolate genes from that serpent and get those genes of that serpent to insert itself into your God-given created DNA. I think this is the plan all along, was to get the serpents, the evil ones' DNA into your God-created DNA. And they figured out how to do it with this mRNA technology.
Yep, they did it right all out in the open while they laughed at you and me. They funded everything from our pockets. Think about that, people. All of your money is going into killing you and your family.
They're using mRNA, which is mRNA extracted from, I believe, the king cobra venom. The king cobra venom. And I think they want to get that venom inside of you and make you a hybrid of Satan, no longer just belonging to God or a creation of God's. The kidney failure caused by Remdesivir is the #1 organ targeted by king cobra venom. It's the #1. There isn't anything in relationship to symptomatology of COVID-19, injuries post-COVID-19 vaccines, treatment with Remdesivir that cannot be correlated back in research studies to venom from cobras, kraits, and other vipers.
Like I said, everyone, welcome to the shit show, the upside down clown world that you are paying for. Please, wake your neighbor up, wake your relative up, whatever it takes. Show them this video. I don't care what you show them. Show them any video. Help them wake up. Peace. I'm out. Late.